Gary, another extraordinary day here.
Yes, and there were a few people going around saying, oh, well, the fact the police are coming in investigating this now, that buys Boris Johnson a bit of time. Maybe there's a silver lining to this, as there was to the defection last week when that brought the party closer together. I really don't buy that, because if we are looking at the police plucking out from Sue Gray's report 8 of the, we believe, 17 events that she has been looking into, that means, Krista Dick, the Met chief, was quite clear about this when she spoke today, that means that there is evidence to point to potential wrongdoing in those events, not hearsay, hard evidence, could be photographic, could be CCTV, could be people checking out of Downing Street with their cards, and you can see that they did it at maybe 4 in the morning, say, or something like that. She's also saying that where she's plucking these cases out for police investigation, there is little ambiguity that there could be a reasonable defence. So this is starting another whole hair going with the police investigation, which will frighten Tories, but it's also giving us a glimpse of what Sue Gray may have found. We understand that the report that Sue Gray has put together is in the very final stages, lawyers checking over stuff. It is possible it's on the Prime Minister's desk tonight, and if it is, I suspect he will want it published tomorrow, and we could very soon after that, potentially, quite a lot of Tory MPs think, be in the territory of a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. They'll be burning the lights late here tonight, but probably no cake.
Police investigation into parties at Number 10 was announced while Cabinet was meeting. But Boris Johnson, who knew it was coming, didn't tell his ministers anything about it.
The government is going from strength to strength.
You're not being investigated by the police, Mr. Moore, because that doesn't really make sense to me.
The government has done an amazing job.
Does the Prime Minister still have your support?
He does, yeah.
The police minister amongst those who appeared to be still in the dark.
This is really serious. This is a serious development. Does the Prime Minister still have your support?
I haven't looked at my phone or anything yet, so you'll
The
have
Met
to...
Police is going to investigate the
You'll have to
Downing Street
forgive
party.
me.
The Cabinet would soon discover what the head of the Metropolitan Police had announced at the London Assembly.
I can confirm that the Met is now investigating a number of events that took place at Downing Street and Whitehall in the last 2 years in relation to potential breaches of COVID-19 regulations.
A few hours later, the Prime Minister told MPs it would help him move on from the allegations.
I welcome the Met's decision to conduct its own investigation because I believe this will help to give the public the clarity it needs and help to draw a line under matters.
In a separate statement on Downing Street parties, Boris Johnson's supporters attacked the attention given to allegations of COVID breaches in Number 10.
Every time the opposition call for our Prime Minister to resign, does my right honourable friend agree that we're only strengthening Putin's hand and destabilising negotiations?
The opposition benches are in cahoots with media to undemocratically depose this Prime Minister.
What has the mood been like among your colleagues?
Well, it's better. I think people are much calmer now. The emails are drying up. People are moving on.
Behind the scenes, on phones and in person around Parliament, the government operation to shore up support for the Prime Minister suggests that's not how it feels in Number 10. Inside the Prime Minister's team, there was real anxiety at the prospect of a police investigation. 15 years after the police last came calling on Tony Blair and members of his Number 10 team over cash for honours allegations.
You go to another piece of police real estate. You go into an office. It could be like a normal office block just around here. You wouldn't know it from outside. You go in, the door closes, and they have got these folders in front of them, piles of folders. And when they ask you a question, you know they've got a string of questions that follow on that, a string that the answer you give will lead to a different thing, and they go back and forth, and they show no mercy, and they do try to destabilise you, try to make you feel uncomfortable.
The Chief Whip could soon be faced with mustering support to head off a vote of no confidence if 15% of Tory MPs demand one, as they did just over 3 years ago.
There will now be a vote of confidence in my leadership of the Conservative Party. I will contest that vote with everything I've got.
Theresa May won that, but was badly wounded. Boris Johnson could be fighting a similar battle very soon, triggered by events in lockdown in Downing Street. His loyalists say it's time to move on from all this, but some in his party worry the voters will neither forgive nor forget.
Well, earlier I spoke to Conor Burns, Minister of State for Northern Ireland, and I began by asking him, did he expect the Sue Gray report to be published as soon as possible and in full?
Well, we've been very clear since the Prime Minister asked Sue Gray to undertake this independent inquiry, a civil servant of impeachable integrity and utter objectivity, that we would like that to come forward as soon as possible, consistent with it being utterly inappropriate for members of Parliament and ministers to put any pressure on Sue Gray to finish her report.
But you would expect it to be published in full? The Prime Minister won't be able to redact or edit anything?
Well, those will be conversations between Sue Gray and the Prime Minister. I expect her findings to be made public in full, and then the Prime Minister quite properly undertook a couple of weeks ago that when that report is in the public domain, he will come to Parliament, he will make a statement, and he will answer questions from members of Parliament for as long as they want.
So in full means unredacted, does it?
Well, I'm not going to give you a commitment. I don't know is the answer. The findings will certainly be published. It'll be a matter for Sue Gray and her team and Number 10 to work out exactly how that works.
And publication could be tomorrow?
You're telling me that that is currently the rumour mill. I've heard nothing that would lead me to believe that's the case, but we'd like it to come as soon as possible.
So you've got a police investigation potentially involving a serving Prime Minister. You've got a senior civil servant doing an independent inquiry. You've lost control of this, haven't you?
Well, I in a funny way welcome the decision by the Met to have a look at this. The police are utterly beyond reproach, entirely independent and impartial. They will look at what happened, they will review the circumstances around it, and they will come to judgments. But the Prime Minister has been very clear that he believes that what he did was consistent with the rules that the rest of us had to follow.
You know, there's been a drip of allegations week after week. You've got colleagues of yours on the same side of you calling for the Prime Minister to quit. You know, the opposition parties are popping champagne corks. Is the Prime Minister now, you're not concerned that he's demeaning the office of the Prime Minister?
No, look, I mean, I saw him this afternoon. I was sitting on the front bench when he gave his statement to Parliament about the situation, the potential very serious situation between Russia and Ukraine, the largest military build-up on continental Europe since the Second World War. And I heard a Prime Minister who was talking about him speaking to his counterparts, heads of government around the world, about coordinating a response to Russia to try and deter any aggression. I heard him talking about coordinating action with NATO allies. I saw a Prime Minister discharging the obligations and duties of being Prime Minister on something that is profoundly important to global stability. So this is a Prime Minister who's getting on with the job of being Prime Minister.
But isn't that just the problem, that he's completely preoccupied by his domestic travails when we have the prospect of war at the heart of Europe? He can't be fully focused on that when he's got the prospect of the police coming and knocking on his door.
Well, if you listen to the Prime Minister in the House of Commons this afternoon, if you listen to his account of the very cogent account of what he and President Putin of Russia discussed before Christmas, about how he's engaging with his fellow heads of government around the world, I saw a Prime Minister absolutely in charge.
You know, one of your colleagues in government, the Culture Secretary, talked about, you know, what was wrong about having some cake in the office. I notice you haven't used that line of defence. Do you recognise now the Metropolitan Police have said that they will be formally investigating, that they must have come across something that was, to use the words of the Commissioner, the most serious and flagrant type of breach? Otherwise they wouldn't have investigated, would they?
Well, look, Cathy, as I said, I welcome the fact actually that the police are looking at that, because when the police come forward with whatever finding they have, the public will trust that, the public will believe that. And I believe the Prime Minister, when he says that he is convinced that when anybody looks at that, be that the Met or Sue Gray, that he will be exonerated, and we will then be able to move on and get back to full-time focus without any distractions for delivering for the British people in all regions and all nations of our United Kingdom.
But this latest party wasn't just a bit of cake in the office, was it? It was a party.
Well, you can characterise these things in different ways. My understanding of that, from what I know of it, and I know as much as you do or your viewers at home know, the Prime Minister was out on visits. He came back, he was working in the Cabinet room. People came in, presented him with a cake on his birthday, they sang happy birthday, he was there for about 10 minutes. It was not a premeditated, organised party in that sense. That the Prime Minister himself decided to have.
Well, invites were sent out.
Well, he, as far as I can see, he was, in a sense, ambushed with a cake. They came to his office with a cake, they sang happy birthday, he was there for 10 minutes. I don't think most people looking at that at home would characterise that as a party.
I mean, ambushed with a cake, it's just sort of farcical, isn't it, the way you're all trying to scurry around and defend him?
He's our leader. I support him. I want him to continue as Prime Minister. I want him to show the British people what we can do in government to make their lives and their communities better.
Conor Burns, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Well, a little bit earlier, I spoke to Andrew Bridgen, who has already submitted a letter of no confidence in Boris Johnson. I began by asking him how important he thought it was that Sue Gray's report was published in full.
I don't think it can be published unredacted. I think if it contains names of junior members of staff who may or may not have been involved in parties, I think that would be sensitive matters, which I think that would need to be redacted. However, the conclusions have got to be there for all to see. I think the sooner the report comes out now, the better, if it is completed, because the country just can't sit under this cloud, paralysing the Prime Minister, paralysing the government. It's no good for democracy, it's no good for the country.
Some of the Prime Minister's allies say, look, this has got completely out of proportion. You've got the Culture Secretary tweeting that when people in an office buy a cake in the middle of the afternoon for someone else they're working in the office with and stop for 10 minutes to sing happy birthday and then go back to their desks, this is now called a party. Is she right that your response is disproportionate?
I've never known a time when a birthday party wasn't a party, and this isn't about parties, birthday parties, or any other celebration. Ultimately, this is about misleading Parliament, and quite honestly, if we can have politicians who can deliberately mislead Parliament, that's not a sort of Parliament I'd want to serve in, and it's not the sort of Parliament I'd want to serve the country.
You think he's demeaning the office of Prime Minister?
If he has deliberately misled Parliament, and I'm sure the report will give us a guide on that, that is really serious. I don't want to be in a post-truth Parliament.
One of the Prime Minister's ministerial allies told us tonight that he was simply ambushed by a cake.
You can spin it how you want to. This isn't about cakes, it isn't about parties. This is about misleading Parliament and whether we can trust the word of the Prime Minister.
We've talked about the potential sanctions that the Prime Minister or others could face. There is also the issue that, you know, Russian troops are massing on the border with Ukraine. Are you concerned that by mobilising calls here for the Prime Minister to quit, that you're weakening his hand and you're strengthening President Putin's hand?
There are many players involved in the escalating situation on the Ukraine border. We're one of them. It's unfortunate, the timing, and it does play to Mr. Putin's advantage. But these issues that are hanging over our government at the moment, they need to be dealt with as soon as possible. I do hope that Sue Gray gets her report in tonight and it's published tomorrow.
When we last spoke last week, you predicted that the 54 letters needed to trigger a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister would be forthcoming by the end of last week. They haven't been. What's happened?
There may be many reasons why people are not putting those letters in. If Sue Gray's report comes out tonight and is published tomorrow, those excuses will disappear.
Do you think they are getting, you know, the thumbscrews turned on them by the whips? Because, again, last time we spoke, you talked about your belief that the whips may have been behind a nasty story about you in one of the papers. Is that something that's putting colleagues off?
No, it's not serious enough for that. I've made my position very well known. It's public. There's no point trying to intimidate me. I don't respond well to that sort of intimidation.
Andrew Bridgen, thanks very much.